just sneak away. While no one is looking. When I'm back this way, I'll let you know. Until then, I just have to go. While my heart is sleeping, I'll think about you where I go. No matter where I go. I'll let you know. Until then, I just have to go. While my heart is sleeping, I'll think about you where I go. When I'm back this way, I'll let you know. Until then, I just have to go. While my heart is sleeping, I'll think about you where I go. No matter where I go.
That's the latest installment by George Millette. That's coming out soon. We're actually working on some artwork for it. George is also a photographer, as well as being a multi-instrumentalist musician. So he's working on some artwork, some cool artwork for that release, and that's called No Matter Where I Go. George lives in Brighton, Ontario. That is up on the shores of Lake Ontario, and he has a wonderful, beautiful home studio. We'll do some photographs of it tonight on the show to show you a little bit about it. But he is a recorder, producer, mixing, mastering. He does a great job on all of his work. He's a perfectionist. So if you live in that area or you're interested in going up there, I think he's even got a place for you to crash if you go up there to do some recording in his studio. So check him out, George Millette, or you can find him on George Millette Music on Facebook. Message him. He's pretty responsive, and I know he's looking for clients. So check him out. All right. Well, we're gonna talk about a bunch of cool stuff tonight on the show. We're gonna talk about networking, social media, and its relationship between digital music sales, digital downloads, as well as streaming and sales. But we're also going to talk about a thing called loyalty. What does it mean? And what does it look like? All that good stuff. But before we do, I want to introduce my co-host with the most from the East Coast, Sean McKenna from the podcast Barstools and Band Talk, Rim Shots with Sean.
Heidi ho.
Heidi ho. What's new on the East Coast tonight?
It's raining here tonight, which is we had a very nice day today, and now it rains. So I guess I'll take the rain at night.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things that we've had a really wet spring here. I mean, it's been a lot of rain, We've had a couple of sunny days now, which is kind of nice. But we're going to get rain tonight, and then maybe rain tomorrow, and then it's going to get nicer on the weekend, but it's going to be cool.
Yeah, I don't know when the spring is officially going to start because it's been pretty cool the last few days here, man.
Who knows, right? I got out for a motorcycle ride today, hence the windburn and the sunburn on the cheeks. Great day for riding.
I have a question for you about that.
Yeah.
So you did your video about being mindful of people on bikes, which is a totally I get.
Yep.
It's if somebody's driving a vehicle and they're fenced inside a vehicle, and somebody's on a bike, obviously it makes sense that if you hit somebody that's on a bike, they can get very badly injured.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
what do you do about those bikers who? The reason I ask is I ran into today. There was a guy who didn't want to sit in traffic, so he chose to go up the shoulder of the road because he goes,
Oh man, that's just that's an accident waiting to happen. I mean, so many things can go wrong with that scenario, right?
right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I understand the frustration that people have and the portability that you have with a motorcycle, but there's also a lot of other risks that go along with stepping outside the lane of traffic and passing to the right. I had an uncle who used to live in California, down in Oakland, California, and he used to go down into the ditch to pass people with his car. How
Well,
crazy
there you go.
on the expressway. I mean, how crazy is that? I remember my sister freaking out because she went down to visit him one time, and he had no patience for the traffic, so he goes right down in the ditch, and he's going along with two wheels on the gravel and two wheels on the grass, and he's zipping down past everybody to get to his next turnoff. Like,
I
so
was
much
an
stuff to
amazing
go.
driver, and then I spent 7 years in Toronto. I just came back a complete mess.
Yeah,
Um,
things can go so wrong. I don't like passing anybody to the right. I always pass to the left, and that's how you should operate your motorcycle like you'd operate your car,
yeah,
right?
that's fair.
And you need to operate it even more carefully because you got to have eyes in the back of your head. When I'm approaching an intersection, right? Because cars are known to blow through stop signs, right?
Yeah,
And they're also known to advance out into the intersection when they're making a turn and not paying attention to the oncoming traffic.
yeah.
And so when I'm approaching a stop and I see traffic coming to the left or right of me, I watch the wheels on the cars to see if they're slowing down. And if I
Yep.
don't see the wheels slowing down on the car, I actually sound my horn on the bike, which actually sounds like a car horn. It's really loud. I got a loud horn on the bike for good reason. They say loud pipes save lives, but people don't hear your pipes until you've gone by them, pretty much.
You don't have one of those little bells? Ding, 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 ding,
On my mountain bike, I do.
ding.
I mean,
I
that's another pet peeve I have when people are out
Geez.
riding on trails or riding on walking trails. They actually should have one of those bells to sound as they're coming up behind you. A lot of times you can't hear a bicycle until it's right behind you.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you
Well, here
step
in Halifax, right? Here in
step the
Halifax,
wrong way, to hit you.
well, if people that live here would know this, and people that visit it will know the phenomenon. But we've got all these bike lanes that take place now, and unfortunately, what's going on is there's this false sense of safety because the city says that they want to open it up to bikes and pedestrians on what they call the peninsula, which is basically downtown Halifax. So you'll get people on their phones if they press the stop walk or the crosswalk lights and just go. They don't it's like this force field automatically comes up, and so there's this real false sense of safety that takes place in the city right now. And that happens a lot with bikes too. They think they're in the bike lane, and I've seen somebody, get hit because somebody opened a car door because they didn't see the bike coming. They ran into the door and all kinds of stuff. So you got to keep your head on a swivel all the time.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that we do during motorcycle season as well, we talk to people who are country property owners and tell them when they're cutting their grass, do not blow your grass onto the pavement.
Yeah,
Fresh cut grass on the pavement is like driving a motorcycle on banana peels.
yeah, I can see that for sure.
Oh man, it's caused accidents. It's caused people's bikes to slide out right from underneath them. And I can't count the number of times I'll go by and someone's riding a riding lawnmower and they're blowing their grass right out on the pavement. It's just a very dangerous thing to happen. So
Well, and I mean, the awareness piece is huge because people don't. I'm not going to say they do things on purpose, but they don't think of things like that sometimes because it's a little thing that they wouldn't know about. So it's good to remind them.
yeah, and even when you're driving a car, I mean, it's really good to be safe when you're approaching a corner. Always look the second time, right? Because
Absolutely.
sometimes you miss something the first time you're looking, and you look that second time and go, oh, I didn't see that car there.
Yeah.
So It's good.
For
It's
sure.
a good thing for safety. So tonight we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're gonna first of all, we're going to talk about where you are sitting right now. You're actually broadcasting tonight from your car.
I'm in my private plane, actually. I can't say where I am. It's a secret. I'm not allowed to say where I am because it's a secret.
Right, you're in a
Um,
secret location, but you're in the dark essentially in your vehicle, right?
that's right.
Yeah. So
Yep,
that's why you look like a talking head tonight, and
that's
that's
right.
all good. We can see your lovely face and we can hear what you're saying, so it's great. Um Last week we sort of set things up. We were going to get into the topic of loyalty
Right.
and what that means in today's world of music, and in the music business itself, which essentially in many ways we're discovering more and more almost on a daily basis how broken it is.
Yeah. I had two conversations today with people who are at that level of, if you want to play in the majors, they're at that level. And they both know each other, but they didn't know that I was going to ask them some questions because I'm in the middle of doing a course on something. And I asked them about this very topic. And they basically said that integrity and loyalty, if you find somebody that has that, you want to do everything that you can to reward them and get them gigs and have them work with you and whatever. Because they're so hard to find, you want to make sure that they're taken care of. And, I just asked the question, is that a problem at your level? And they said 100% it is, because it doesn't matter who you are. Human nature is to always look for the greener pasture, the cooler person, the better guitar player, the cooler manager. And they said that at their level, it actually affects people a lot quicker because they just won't get calls back to do stuff. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and you and I think that's one of the reasons why you and I get along so well, because we both believe in that transparency, integrity thing, laying it out there and letting people see that you're not out there to take advantage of them. You're looking at something that may become mutually beneficial to both of you. Um,
Yep.
Symbiotic relationships come to mind when I think of that.
So I totally get in any business, but in the music business, I'll use that as the example because it's what I know the best. I get why people are nervous about forging that type of relationship because there's that saying, the music business is full of liars, cheats, thieves, and those are the good people. And unfortunately, that's what people have known. So when somebody comes, across their desk or whatever and says, I'm not here to screw you, I'm here to help you, it's a hard thing to accept because what they're used to is, yeah, sure you are. The 8 other people said the same thing. And um, so I get why people don't want to take a flyer on something. Um, One of the guys that I talked to, it was really interesting. And again, I can't name names because I swore to secrecy, but he was basically up for a role in the current act that he's in. And unbeknownst to him, the leader of that band and the manager of that band just randomly started calling people that he had worked with in the past, asking about him. He
Right.
got the gig for two reasons. One, because they knew him because of the network, and two, because everybody came back and said, this guy is a man of integrity, he's a man of loyalty, and he brings a lot to the party, and that's how we get the gig. And he said to me, imagine if that wasn't, I didn't have the chance to give anybody a heads up that they were going to be calling. They just did it.
Right.
He goes, imagine
Right.
if I was that guy that was totally ripping people off all the time. I wouldn't have this gig right now.
Right. It's really interesting, when ever somebody's interested in joining the label, right, or in joining the Indie Tunes family, or getting on our roster, inevitably they'll say, "Oh, can I talk to any of the artists on your label?" I said, "You can reach out to any of them if you want." They'll tell you the good, bad, and the indifferent about working with me. But I don't expect there to be much indifferent. I don't expect there to be much bad, because I mean the only bad might be is that I'm spread pretty thin, right?
Yeah.
But the good is that people that are working with me recognize the amount of work that goes into what I do to get their music out in front of the public. You're one of those guys that really understands that. Uh, you know, Dave, who's watching the show tonight, Dave Urselli from Trickshot, Brent Durner, you guys understand the amount of work that goes into what I do, and all that's involved in it. And Brent's like, you should be charging people for that stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I can, but I hate everybody's always got their hand in somebody's pocket, right? I don't want to be that guy that's like, this is going to cost you this is going to cost you this is going to cost you this. I think the idea is developing that symbiotic relationship, that partnership where people can help me with my workflow. And sometimes it's a case that people just don't know what they need to do.
Yep. Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, to Brent's point, I would agree. I understand where you're coming from. My only, I guess, question that I recently started posing to people is they don't want to pay somebody for a service that they provide, but they'll take a sponsored ad on Facebook and not even think about it, right? Or
Right.
they don't want to pay somebody for a service that they provide, yet they will pay somebody else for a service they provide. And I asked somebody the other day, they want to help with something, and I just said, okay, well, here's what I can do. And they started questioning some things, and I was just like, no problem. You know, can I give you, maybe it'll take me 5 minutes. I'll give you a rundown on all the money that I've lost helping people because, I thought that it was gonna, come back to benefit me,
Right.
and it hasn't. And that was the end of the conversation. And that's, I'm not even lying when I say that. And so I get how you want to position yourself, but I also think too that sometimes, because I'm no different, but I think sometimes you put yourself in a spot where that's where they always kind of see you.
Right.
And it's hard to get it out of it. And I'll use this example. So one of the guys that I talked to today, before he became an actual member of a band, he was a tech for many, many years.
Right.
A very, very, very super proficient musician, but he was always known as a tech. And his line to me was, people are going to know you for what you put out there about yourself. So he never got calls because everybody was like, you're amazing. But he was always the tech guy. He was never considered the guy to be put in a band.
Right.
And so, I think that by doing what you and I do sometimes the way we do, I think we paint ourselves into a corner where people just think, you know what, they're not real. And
I think so. Sometimes I think we sell ourselves a little bit short. For me, this was never really ever about the money, because even when artists come to me, they've sort of gone past that delusional state to understand that they're ever going to get rich selling digital music, right?
Yeah.
They've gone past that and realized, this is more about just getting our music in front of as many people as we can. And yeah, it's great if we make some money along the way. That's a good thing. But I know I'm not going to be able to maybe quit my day job or retire on what I'm going to earn off my digital earnings. However, as you and I forge forward on this project, and the conversations I have with Brent and others on the label, I'm slowly discovering, ways and means that we could potentially develop other revenue streams that could potentially all add up. Those pennies add up, right?
They do. And I think diversification is the key. And, an awful lot of this business right now, unfortunately, is, I don't want to say is an exposure business, but there's very little of it that actually makes any money, right?
Right.
It's never been more apparent that this business is set up to not have people make money.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. So you got to look at other ways and means to do it. And
It's really interesting. I mean, you and I started a conversation the other night, and I finally was able to watch the first episode of Bon Jovi's documentary.
yeah,
And I've read about it before, but the visual, watching him go through the motions of what he's doing this late in his career, 40 years in, for Bon Jovi, and him talking about all the years he made no money at all, and how he kept working to position himself to be successful. And everybody that he went to basically said, "Oh no, you're never going to make it. You're not a singer. You don't know how to sing. You don't know how to do this. You don't know how to do that." And then he took on that job at the power station, right? Basically is lower than an intern. I mean, but he got to watch, all the masters, and of course, being involved with Johnny and the Asbury Dukes, all that stuff, watching all that stuff develop, Bruce Springsteen, coming to light there, all that stuff was an eye opener for him. And during that whole time, he made no money, like
Yep.
nothing, nada, not a thing at all. And and here's a guy, that once like Runaway, for example. Nobody wanted to listen to Runaway. He couldn't get a terrestrial radio station to pick up Runaway until he went to DJs himself.
Yep.
And got them to start playing it. Next thing you know, it just caught on like a fever. Right.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, and of course, Springsteen explains in the documentary, nobody took anybody from New Jersey
Yeah.
seriously. They didn't take him seriously at all.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? His drive definitely fascinated me, right? I mean, and my two takeaways, and I posted about this, were that I could remember, bombing around the Halifax Commons with me and my two buddies when the Slippery When Wet first came out, at midnight on like a Saturday, because we couldn't get in the clubs. We were only 15 or 16 years old, and
Right.
well, 16 because we were driving. But and a kid nowadays won't get that sort of same thing. And the other thing that I remember is, I remember watching their rise and how inspiring it was. And it was like, that's why I want to be a musician, because all these magazines were out and you were seeing the videos, and it was, kids nowadays are never going to get that, and they don't want it, I guess, because they don't know it. But the third thing is with streaming. I mean, Slippery When Wet's a great. I use this as an example. I like the second side better than the first side, but had that album came out now, I would have never found the second side, because I only would have had the hit shoved down my throat on the streaming platforms, right?
I can remember when Bon Jovi came out with Bed of Roses. I mean, every woman that I knew was absolutely in love with him, especially because of that song.
Oh yeah, no question.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was probably the most requested song at a bar. When you went to a bar, or have it played on the house sound system, the women in the bar would want that song played, and they'd all be singing it. They knew every word to the song.
Well, in Halifax, they have what they call cabarets here, which close at 3:30, and we used to call those the last chance for romance, because you go to there was three of them. There was the Misty Moon, there was the Palace, and there was the Crazy Horse in Dartmouth. And yeah, I remember that. And that documentary. It's so funny, because I don't know that a band like that today, if he came out today, I don't know that he'd have the same success, because of the way the industry's set up now.
No, and then there was also, I mean, we're talking about loyalty night. There's a loyalty piece involved in underpinning all of his work as well. Like his keyboard player has been with him right from the beginning.
Yeah, and that's definitely interesting, because like,
I mean, he gave up being a doctor to be in the band.
Yeah. Well, Springsteen had Little Steven, right? And Little Steven kind of stepped out and did other things, but he always found his way back to the E Street Band. And even when Bruce, iced the E Street Band there in the late '80s, and eventually they came back. And but you don't get that anymore. Like, it's funny. Like, the guys that I spent a lot of time talking to in the business are guys that came up years ago. And they all admit, like, if they were going to have to start now, man, it'd be pretty tough sledding, because it's not geared for the indie artist to find success, right?
Well, and I mean, let's face it, like the really big venues and big shows there and big tours just don't really exist anymore. I mean, we're seeing the legacy bands sort of burning out on these tours, and you wonder how much longer this go. I mean, the artists still putting the most bums in the seats these days are Def Leppard.
Yeah, you
in
notice
terms,
they go out. They're doing these stadium tours, right? Because they're trying to
yep,
maximize the impact out there, and
yep.
I get it.
Yeah, I mean, and they're one of the few legacy bands that are really still putting a good product out there, because they're putting the same effort into their live shows that Bon Jovi is doing. I mean, when COVID hit, that killed a lot of live music for everybody, and there was like that 2-year lull where nobody was doing much of anything.
Yeah,
And
but
and
you
he
remember,
even
you
described
remember,
the COVID fog, right? The whole COVID fog when he went back to playing again.
but you remember it was like as soon as live music comes back, I'm going to support it, and we're not seeing that. And I get the economy is crap. I get that. Um, I've had a couple of conversations about this week where it's like I can't believe that you'll go and you'll get like a McDouble meal at McDonald's, and it's $2 more now than it was this time last year. That stuff is crazy, and I get why people are having a hard time. But sometimes there's free shows that you can go to. Like here in Halifax, they have a stipend that they take on hotel rooms, and basically the city uses that in the summertime to put on free shows.
Yeah.
And some of those are sparsely attended.
Yeah,
Um,
one of the things I think that is hurting things these days for live music is that we've got a shrinking sort of um, circuit of clubs to play at. That was one of the things that he talked about that allowed them to, and Springsteen even talked about it in the documentary, that how they cut their teeth was being able to play in all these clubs and playing several shows, right? I remember the keyboard player saying, we'd finish up at the bar at 2 o'clock in the morning, go home, dump off the equipment. I get to bed at 5 o'clock and have to get up for 7 to go to school.
yeah,
You know, and that's a huge commitment.
yep.
And the work involved in that, and then now even Bon Jovi at his age now, he's 62 years old now, right? And so the moisturizing, the steamer in the room, the vocal exercises, trying to keep his vocal cords relaxed and loose and limber so they can vibrate properly. I think that's got to be the hardest thing as a musician, being the front man that's doing the primary vocals in the band, because that is an instrument that you have to take really good care of.
Oh yeah. No singer, no show. I mean, you know, nothing against instrumental acts, but I mean, people go to instrumental acts because that's something that they want to see.
Yeah.
Would you want to go to a Bon Jovi concert and watch just, it's like Muzak in an elevator or something, right?
Yeah,
So
it wouldn't go over well. I mean, and I look at guys like Brian Vollmer, who are still singing 50 years in, and all the work that he has to go through and the vocal exercises that he does, to keep his voice limber. And he said, he wants to play more shows because the more shows he plays, the more he gets to work his voice, right? And he said every time you go and do a show, you got to do all these vocal warm-ups to warm up your vocal cords and get them relaxed so that they'll vibrate the way you want, and you can hit the notes and stay on the right side of the note, so you're not singing sharp, you're not singing flat. Um, can you imagine a guitar player that was it's constantly playing sharp or flat? It wouldn't sound right.
I've seen a few.
And you notice it right away, right? When a guitar player goes sharp or flat on a note, you notice it right away, right?
I was at a show a few weeks ago, and the guitar player actually sent Brent a note about this. I won't say who it is, but the guitar player that's supposed to be known as a renowned player in the country I felt was selling clams like crazy. And I mean, everybody has a bad night, don't get me wrong. But, I've been around enough really good musicians to know that if you're not having a good night, you avoid certain things to not repeat them. And it just seemed like it was a whole night of that. And to me, it was just a very bizarre thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I get what you're saying.
I want to talk a little bit about what we've been sort of driving forward to people, and talk a little bit about why it's so important to draw that relationship between your social media, and why artists need to work hard on their social media. And if they can't, they need to get a social media manager to manage their social media, to draw attention to who they are, what they're doing, what their role is in the world of music, and get that organic following, that correlation between, social media engagement and digital music streaming is so important. And of course, we're pushing really harder on the other end of digital downloads off our website, because I see that is more sustainable for artists than, a pure streaming platform that is never really going to pay you any real money for your music. Where at least if people are downloading your music, and the cool thing about people downloading off our platform is that our artists earn 75 cents on every dollar that gets spent.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to find that opportunity anywhere else. Plus the opportunity to still have your music published globally on top of that. So it's just another opportunity at revenue streams that we're creating for artists. And I remember a conversation I had, and an artist was interested in coming on board on the label. And I said, well, check with other bands that are on the label and see what they think about working with me. Right. And it was really funny because a lot of times people don't realize that I have access to people's social media as well. That's been part of some of what I do, because sometimes I'll go on and help them with their social media if they're struggling on their social media, and give them a little bit of help. And I got part of the conversation between this person and this artist on the label. And the thing they couldn't get past was giving up 25% for all the work that I do.
Yeah. I, I, uh, I'll sound like a broken record on this, but people are just conditioned for free stuff,
Hey,
right?
take your glasses off. You're freaking me out.
I can't see with my glasses off.
Oh, okay. Because what's happened is there's
I know
something.
my there. I'll do that.
There's two white circles in it,
That's
and
my that's
it
my
looks like
Disney. That's my
eyeballs. It looks
Disney.
like
That's my
eyeballs.
Disney light. But people are conditioned for free stuff, and I mean, I've sat in a number of seminars about how to build YouTube by giving away free things, and um, so that's a tough thing. Um, you know, YouTube actually calls it the entitled customer, because people feel like you're doing you a favor by going and looking at something for free that doesn't cost them anything, and they don't understand how it works. And that's not a rip at anybody. I mean, it's just the way that things are set up in this world that we live in right now.
So here's an interesting thing. So a certain person, I'm not going to say their name, but they're on the label, and they offered to give me some help with encoding tracks, right? And so I sent them the software to download, right? And they're like, holy fuck, I don't even know how to make up a template that works for this to encode the tracks. How do you do all this shit? Right. And I said, that's why I don't let anybody else do it.
Right.
Because I'm a perfectionist. I want to make sure that the tracks are all coded appropriately. And it was interesting because an interesting conversation with one of the artists that's putting out another single. And I said, oh, what I need now, along with your metadata, is your ISWCs, right? And one of the guys in the band is like, what the fuck is an ISWC? Right? It said it stands for International Standard Work Code. That is the code that's assigned to your written work of your music, that also defines that publishing right to your music belongs to you, Or if you have co-writers, you're sharing that publishing right with your co-writers by registering it with a performance right organization. Okay. So that's just the one piece of the music. And I said, it's relatively new that I'm doing this, because what I've discovered is that if you embed the ISWCs on a track along with the ISRC, which is the International Standard Recording Code, which is for the actual recorded master. Okay. So we're now talking about two different mediums here. You can actually collect more royalties, because you're not only collecting mechanical royalties, but you're also collecting publishing rights royalties off that music. And someone may go to an organization like Connect Music Canada and purchase the rights to be able to use your music on a podcast or whatever. And unless you have secured those publishing rights, you won't get paid the publishing rights every time that music gets used. So if it ends up, it ends up in some sort of a sync deal, right? Every time that song gets played, if it's a commercial, if it gets used in a commercial, or if it gets used in a documentary, it gets used on a podcast, every time it gets played, you get paid, but you don't get paid if it's not properly registered.
Yeah.
Right. So in my conversation, and here's the thing, that this just is one small example of the work that I do that I don't get remunerated for. And I'm not saying this to bitch. It was really more an education thing to demonstrate how much work I do on one track just to do the publishing. Right. So here goes. I'm just going to say this really, really quick. It takes upwards of an hour to encode both a Wave Master for publishing and an MP3 for radio promos. Okay, so we're talking about an hour to do that encoding, because you have to encode both the MP3 and the Wave Master. There's no way to encode them simultaneously. So it ends up being a cut and paste back and forth process. And then you have to go and manually verify the data on both of those mediums to make sure it's accurate, right? So that's an extra check over and above all of that. So you've got that done. Then I cross-check both the Wave Master and the MP3 to ensure the metadata is exactly the same. Everything is double-checked ahead of publishing. The process of fully publishing a track after it's encoded can take upwards to another hour to globally publish it and to publish it fully on my website, plus linking it to those main streaming services like iTunes and Spotify. So just one track alone can take upwards to 2 hours to fully process to the point of publishing. I don't get paid for that 2 hours. If I was, I would be charging $50 an hour. It's a very technical process, and it requires a lot of information, because you're not just embedding the ISRCs and ISWCs. Now we're embedding short descriptions of the songs, as you know. And we're putting more metadata into the songs, because software programs like Gracenote, which is used in most automobiles these days, can read that data while your track is playing in the car.
Yep.
And it pops up on your screen, right? So if you have a description of the song, if that automobile, the software in that automobile is compliant, and you're playing our MP3 tracks of our artists, you'll actually see a description of the song, what inspired the song, maybe what the song is about, right? And oftentimes when people get a sense of where the artist's mind was when they created the song, it sits with them differently. Maybe it resonates with them because the artist is coming from a place where the listener has been, or, oh my God, there's somebody else that feels the way that I do.
Yep.
You know?
No, for sure.
An identification piece.
And I mean, that's about the best PSA you can give for, the revenue split, the 75-25. And I mean, it's funny because you talk to people all the time, and they use whatever, and they can do it themselves. But I mean, think about this for a second. 2 hours out of doing that with one song is 2 hours out of you writing a song, or practicing, or doing social media to push yourself ahead. Or there's only so many hours in a day, and I get why people think they can do it. I just don't know why they bother. It's just
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. I mean, and there is the loyalty that I offer every single client that is on our roster,
yeah,
right? That loyalty is, and explaining to them, right? And these guys were truly. It's not that they didn't get it; it's an awareness thing, right? Um, and here's an interesting thing is as so I came up with this idea that I think we're going to use for other artists. They create a Google document because we use Google Drive for sharing our files back and forth with our artists. And I said, develop a Google Doc that has all these fields on it. And every time you do a release, fill in that information on the doc, right? Save that new release, and I will use that information to embed the metadata, and it saves a whole lot of back and forth,
yeah.
right? To nail things down. I mean, here's an interesting thing. A lot of people don't even realize this, that over half the artwork that gets sent to me by artists is wrongly formatted.
I can
Right?
believe it because you and I have had many conversations about that.
And I will often not even contact the artist. I will just reformat the art to get it into the perspective that I need, because the digital music stores are really, really finicky about accepting artwork, and they'll actually reject a track if the artwork doesn't meet certain specs, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking 160 different internet stores, download and streaming services that we deal with. And of course, that all gets pushed out in one fell swoop, right? So we use a label version of an aggregator to do all of our push on our publishing digitally. And so we have to meet very specific criteria for the artwork in order it gets rejected from one store. You've got to upload all over again and correct the artwork before you publish again. So you have to unpublish it, and then you have to go back in, make all the changes to the artwork to make sure it's, meeting the criteria. Because if it's blurry, if the artwork is not clear and it's blurry, they can reject the artwork.
Or you can just do it yourself, right? I mean,
Well, and this is the thing. Most people were doing it themselves, and the problem is that 99.9% of the time it wasn't published correctly.
yeah,
Right? People didn't know what ISRC codes were. They didn't know what ISWC codes were, or how that stuff was actually embedded, and what it meant in terms of future royalty collection. Right? All of that good stuff. And so that part gets missed. So what I'm saying here is that there's a huge amount of loyalty on my part that goes into everything I do for every artist that is on our roster. And I expect no less in return. I expect this to be a completely reciprocal relationship. So while it's a lot of work, if people supply some very basic data, there's about 11 data fields that I need that are specific to every artist's music, stuff that I couldn't possibly know about. Okay, a lot of times I know what the track is, but I don't know, is there a version title for it? Is there an AKA to the song, right? Is it got some sort of a link to an AKA? The other thing is what genre do you want your music put into? Do you want to just leave it up to me to decide what genre we're going to publish your music under? Which is not a bad idea, because I listen to every track that I get from artists probably several times through by the time I'm finished processing it, because I take the wave masters, bounce them down to high res MP3s. And that's what we use for radio submissions. So I always listen through the track anyway, trying to sort of pin down the genre a little bit more, because sometimes artists will pick the wrong genre and wonder why they're not getting engagement. And it can be as simple as putting your music in the wrong genre.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because when you're getting these artists that are, I guess, doing the crossover stuff, so maybe it's a country tune that's going into pop or whatever.
That's right.
Oftentimes I've talked to people who are like, "Well, we're not getting any play on our song," and it's like, well, you're because you don't have it kind of put in the right bucket, and they don't get it. And again, it's one of those things where, okay, well, what do? Do you try to convince them, or you just let them kind of spin themselves into the ground talking about it? And this is kind of the, like I said, the era that we're in, because people, you know, the internet and somebody else's opinion is obviously always more valuable than, people that can just do it for them. And it's a whole analogy of walking across a minefield. I just don't understand why you don't find out who did it and follow in their footsteps instead of trying to do it yourself and possibly getting killed, right? But
Yeah, and figuring out your genre. Know what your primary genre is. Know what your secondary genre is for your music and how you want to publish it. Because believe me, if you publish your music and put it in the wrong genre, you're not getting the audience in front of the audience that's going to see it, because there are filters that are put on all of these download and streaming services, things like algorithmic playlists that suggest to you or me as users what we might like.
Yep.
But it's based on the genres that we pick. So let's say you're a metal band, but you're really more a hard rock band, and you put yourself under metal, right? You might get in front of a metalhead audience that has absolutely no interest in what you're playing, because they listen to your music and they go, that's not metal, that's hard rock.
Yeah, I would bank on that, actually, because I mean, look at what's going on with Beyonce right now, where people are all up in arms because she's doing a quote unquote country record. Like it or
Yeah.
lump it, but it's getting people's attention, right? And I had a conversation with somebody that she's not a country artist. Well, no, she's not a country artist, but she did a country song. And which, if you think about it, I mean, go back and look at the history of Mutt Lange when he, brought Shania Twain into country
That's
music.
right. That's right.
He was told by that industry, yeah, you'll never, you can't do it. You're a rock guy. I'll show you. And look what happened, right?
And she crossed a couple of different genres. I mean, she crossed into pop as well as country and into country rock.
I think anybody in that genre, I think that's what they all aspire to do, because they're smart enough to figure out that, pigeonholing yourself to one genre is going to be, limiting in terms of getting your music out there, in terms of selling it, in terms of people buying it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, people just don't, when they think of Beyonce, they don't connect that to country music, right? Much like Post Malone, same thing. Look at all the genres that he's crossed into from rap and hip hop.
Yeah.
Right. And he is every bit as good a country singer as he is a rap artist. And I'd like to hear him do a rock album.
Well, it's probably coming.
He's got a great voice. The guy's got a great voice. He can sing, right? He can sing, and he can also play really well. I mean, he's a multi-talented dude. So, he's one of those guys that was one of the first to really start really working hard and crossing different genres. And people go, "Oh, Post Malone doing country," right? Now he's playing with Dwight Yoakam's band.
Yeah, I mean,
doesn't get much more country than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, things are changing. You got to roll with the punch. I mean, the big thing is as far as this whole music industry, is you got to decide what's going to work for you, right? And you got to decide, okay, do I want to be An artist is going to make it. And I'll give you a great example. I interviewed a gentleman the other day by the name of Kyle Pfeiffer, who's with a band called Blacklight District,
Right.
who 10 years ago wasn't really doing much. They were putting albums out. And he found a site on YouTube that was a guy who did a bunch of stuff with the Minecraft video game.
Right.
And he went on there, and Kyle found out that this guy was using a lot of Kyle's tunes. So instead of freaking out, he just went to him and said, "Hey, can we, strike up a partnership? I'll continue to write the tunes for you.
Right.
We'll split the revenue." He's coming up on, I think he's got close to 300,000 YouTube subscribers on his channel alone. And
That's
sometime this
loyalty.
year, he's going to break the $1 million amount in streaming. And he goes, if I didn't go, and talk to this guy that had a video game website, and I just said, "Oh, I want to be a metal guy," I would have been missing out on that.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Dave's got a really good point here. Dave from Trickshot. He says education. Luckily, I wanted to learn and grow personally. If people don't want to earn, if people want to earn, they got to learn.
that's a fair statement.
Yeah. And learning is also, along with learning, I would also contend equally important as that is building relationships and never burning down bridges.
Yeah, and I mean, look, far be it for me to give the seminar on that topic because, but that being said, the thing about this industry more than anything, it's weird, but I've dealt with a number of situations where somebody gets a gig because somebody referred them, and then instead of doing the gig, they take a better paying gig and refer somebody else that's an inferior player, and it winds up looking bad on the original person. And it's one of those things where the person that was given the gig in the first place is like, "Yeah, not my problem. Wasn't my gig in the first place." That unfortunately becomes the norm. Things like that. And that's
Right.
back to the integrity piece again, right? I mean, it's like, I had a conversation again with this guy a couple of weeks ago. I was offered a gig, and I took it. And then 2 days later, I got offered another gig for a lot more money. And you know what I did? I said, "Sorry, I'm not available because I already signed off on this other one, and I made less money. But guess what? I made a commitment. And will it ever come back in any way? Well, it has because I've been offered more gigs. But guess what? If it didn't, I knew I did the right thing."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now I also want to talk about loyalty in terms of how artists work to build loyalty in fans and followers, right?
Yeah.
Here's an interesting thing. So this weekend, I'm off to St. Charles, Illinois, to see Honeymoon Suite and Helix at the historic Arcada Theater in St. Charles, Illinois. Now it's a historic theater. I don't know I can't remember how big it is, like 3,000 seats, something like that. It's like a performing arts center, and it's historic. So I'm going to go hear Honeymoon Suite sing songs like New Girl Now, Burning in Love, Wave Babies, Stay in the Light. Helix hits like Rock You, Heavy Metal, Love, Make Me Do Anything You Want, and so forth. I mean, those bands have worked hard over the years to develop loyalty in their followers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that so much loyalty that, like you, right, you've developed loyalty with the teams of people that you work with out there. Jason, you got a really talented guy there that you're working with that saw the vision of what you're doing and wanted to be a part of it. Right. And there's a loyalty thing behind that, just like the loyalty that you and I are developing for one another in terms of the work that we do together. That loyalty piece and integrity goes so far in building relationships and moving you forward, and it pays back down the road when you're going out and doing shows and still selling out venues.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I think the hardest part is when you try to maintain that integrity and you see it not being maintained all around you. And and I'm not gonna say I'm so great and I'm so superior.
Yeah.
But just the way that I'm wired is that I would rather do the right thing instead of having an argument down the road.
Take the high road.
Well, I do have an argumentative streak, but by the same token, a part of me just doesn't like to do it. And it's very, very tough when you try to maintain that loyalty or that integrity, and then you see somebody else is just not doing it. They're not doing it, and they don't care, and everybody else around you knows they're doing it, and they don't care, and they still support them, and that's a tough thing. But at the end of the
I've
day,
seen that with so-called record labels that people talk about lack of integrity, and nobody gets called out on this stuff,
I
right?
call it the hockey parent argument. Okay.
Yeah.
Where I was part of a minor hockey association for 16 years, and somebody wouldn't like something that happened in tryouts, and they bring it to your attention, and I would always say, well, hey, do we want to go and talk to the person that you feel made the mistake? No, I don't want it to affect my kid. In other words, I want you to go talk to the person, and I want you to have a bad experience on my behalf, but I don't actually want to step up and do something for myself. And that's the hockey parent argument to me. Not all of them, but there's this fear that if you speak your mind or you bring something in a polite, constructive way to light, it's going to impact you. And I guess my only question would be, well, if it doesn't impact you and you get what you want, do you not feel like at some point in time down the road?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that fear, though, is founded upon real evidence, right? I mean, evidence that you've gone to people before and they've not been receptive towards you, or when you did, your kid got punished for it because all you were doing was advocating for someone who's too young to advocate for themselves.
No, I get that, but I mean, the question that I would always ask the parent at the end of the day is, do you want your kid to be around a person of that character? And
Yeah.
because don't get me wrong, I get involved in minor hockey because my oldest son had something happen to him that I didn't like. And do you think you can do a better job? Yeah, I can. Well, put your money where your mouth is, and boom, there I was 16 years later. Did I do everything right? Absolutely not. But my point is that, and don't get me wrong, I've always get the whole fight for the underdog sort of thing because my whole life I've been the underdog. But
Right.
I do believe that, if you don't step up and state your piece, at some point in time, if you get ahead by not doing that, it's going to come back to bite you in the rear end.
Yeah, I think you need to be, if I could liken this to an animal, I would say be the eagle. Don't be the turkey. Don't flock with the turkeys. Fly with the eagles, because the eagles have that view from 20,000 feet. They can see so much more, right? When you stay open and you're never closed to possibility, right? And you're always willing to operate with transparency, with integrity, and in an idea that you're going to be loyal to people even when they're not loyal to you, because what you're really trying to do is demonstrate to them. And loyalty, I don't know, to me that's an action verb, right?
Yeah.
To me, it's the state of doing. And we're going to talk more about this in other shows, I'm sure. But to me, being loyal is a state of doing. It's not an adjective. It's an action verb, right? Being loyal means constantly doing things to demonstrate your loyalty to whatever it is you're doing.
Yep. But people lose loyalty because either they walk over somebody and somebody doesn't like it, or the person that is having some success loses fans because some people are maybe jealous and they don't like what's happening. And one of the people that I talked to today had one of the greatest lines. And I mean, I sat there, I said, wow, that's so simple. But he basically said, there's always going to be people that are ahead of you and always going to be people that have more happen for them than you. But if you can't find something to be happy about where you are, then you're never going to get to that level. And it was just like, I want to punch you in the face right now, but you are absolutely 100% correct. Any gripe that I've had is because I have this perception, real or otherwise, that somebody's getting something ahead of me that they don't deserve, and I'm not getting my just
Right.
desserts, if you will. And it's actually kind of a sad thing because what you do is you miss out on opportunities because you just want to be angry and bitter.
Right.
It's tough. I get it. I really do.
Here's an interesting thing that we're on this roll right now. I mean, we're at 59 minutes here, and I think we're going to end up with at least one period of overtime tonight.
Okay.
um, because I don't think I can stop us there. Is that people can screw that up so badly just by one bad action.
Yeah.
You can kill loyalty so quickly just by doing something that is really not beneficial for you or the people involved.
Well, and one of the things, you talk about learning and constantly learning. And one of the things that I'm constantly learning is that if you aspire to get to a certain place, and whatever that is to you, it is to you. But if you're not there, the only way you get there is by talking to people that are there and finding out how they got there. And you're going to hear some things that they don't like or that you don't like.
Here it is right here. All you got to do is meet me halfway,
Right?
right? A simple handshake, right? And I think we've lost the value of what a handshake means. It means I'm extending myself to you. When you reach out and shake my hand, you're acknowledging that level of commitment, that level of loyalty, that I'm willing to be loyal to you if you're willing to be loyal to me. The handshake has really lost its sense of value in truly what it really means. I'm reaching out to you halfway. All you got to do is reach out and grab my hand. But when you do, it means something. It's not a meaningless gesture.
No. And I mean, I I really think that, 2020 and what happened, it freaked people out to the point where they don't have trust in people anymore. They don't have trust in authority. They don't have trust in certain institutions. And I mean, I'm not going to go on a big rant about that, but you can see it every day about just people's. I mean, I remember, being 8 years old, and my dad's insurance agent came over to the house and sat around the table and signed all the insurance policies with my dad around the table.
Listen,
I
the
couldn't
first,
even tell you the name of my insurance person now because I do it all online, and you know what I mean.
I mean,
And
this is the only thing that I'm going to say about this that relates to anything remotely political, is that as soon as governments invent new taxes, right? People start mistrusting everything because they're like, okay, is this really going to be used for what the government says it's going to be used for, or is the government just running out of money and finding more ways to fund whatever they're doing, whatever their agenda is,
yeah,
right? And I think the problem with that whole mindset is that you you can't take something that you mistrust about this world, whether it's the government, whether it's whatever. You can't take that and apply it to every single situation. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. And I realize why people have trouble with that, because if they've been hurt in the past by extending themselves and then felt used in that process, it makes them shy about it.
I think it makes them angry and bitter, and then maybe shy. And I
Mm.
mean, and I get that. And those are real, um, real emotions and real thoughts and actions and whatever. And I do get it. And that's right back to the whole loyalty piece. I mean, I know some people in this business that have been repeatedly messed over, and they
Yeah.
still go back and want to, help out and do the right thing.
And here's a psychological component to all of that, right? A certain amount of that turmoil emotionally can cause a great deal of undue stress on both parties. The person who, is resilient enough to bounce back from that, but the person who ends up emotionally damaged as a result of that relationship, it takes so much away from them, right?
Yep.
When they can't, when they feel like they can't be loyal to somebody because they feel like they're going to be used again, or something bad is going to happen to them again if they don't, truly build a good relationship with that person. And I've seen that happens. I had one artist that I've talked to. They had somebody help them out there with their social media, and the person locked them out of their social media.
Right.
What? Who does that?
Well, yeah.
Why would you ever do that to somebody? Why would you offer to help somebody with their social media, and then, if they reach some level of success on the social media because of the help you've been giving them, you lock them out of their own account?
I years ago there was a person that used to run a production company here that used to do it all the time. Where if they felt they were ripped off, they would hold on to people's gear and threaten to sell it until they get their money. Um, and
Uh,
and it was one of those things where everybody knew it happened and everybody knew it could possibly happen. Yet that person still got work, and that always it always perplexed me a little bit. Uh,
here's always this integrity thing that's going on. Spotify, for example, is cracking down on what they consider to be artificial streaming.
yeah,
Right. And pulling people's music because they detect what they consider to be artificial streaming on the artist's music, et cetera, et cetera. And making that determination unilaterally without giving the artist any recourse to say, hey, wait a minute, we don't engage in that kind of stuff. But here's the thing: how that system can be actually gamed, right? um, if somebody wanted to hurt somebody else that's on Spotify, you could subscribe to have their music pushed by one of these promotional services that's not approved by Spotify. It'll
yeah,
show up as artificial streams, and that person will get their music pulled off the Spotify platform.
yeah.
All because you decided to be spiteful. I mean, what kind of people do that stuff to somebody else that's just trying to get their music out there? They're not looking.
Well, I'm not going to be political or anything. I don't know in your province, but we had people who were, in positions of power telling people in the media to, if you saw your neighbors doing stuff they weren't supposed to do, contact the police. And so, I mean, you know, and
Yeah.
again, there's another thing that just happened in Canada that I'll be interested to see what happens. Now, if you get pulled over, you're automatically given a breathalyzer,
Yeah, holy
right?
shit. What's that
And
all about?
well, I get it because there's so many people drinking and driving and they're falling through the
Yep.
cracks, and I
Yep.
totally understand that.
Yep.
And there's never any excuse for drinking and driving. Um, but does that not, maybe infringe on our charter rights some way? I don't know. So these are all things when you're talking about how can somebody be so spiteful? Well, when you know, say I want to run for city council in Halifax, and my agenda is to get rid of bike lanes, and I win, and I move heaven and earth to get rid of bike lanes, which are a huge
Right.
thing here. Um, I'm put in a
Just lost
position
you.
of power, and I can do that.
Talk
So I
back.
mean, again, it's like if you're asking why people are spiteful, well, they see it every day from people that are influencing them, right? So
I just knocked my monitor out of my ear. I got excited there when you said all that because it's
no,
like,
no. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, if people are seeing this from people that are influencers, then to them it's not spiteful. To them, it's just a normal day of, you know, normal day at the office,
yeah,
right?
it's really funny. I want to end tonight on a funny note. So, have you seen that reel on Facebook where the cop pulls the guy in the he pulls in behind the guy and the chick stopped at the stop sign,
No,
and they roll down the window and all this weed smoke comes out the window,
yeah,
and he looks at him. Have you been smoking weed today? She looks at him like, no, right?
yeah,
He said, well, I've been behind you like for the last, you know, 15 minutes and you're stopped at a stop sign. Yeah, we're waiting for it to turn green.
yeah,
that is what got to be one of the funniest reels that I've ever seen.
yeah. And I mean, again, what I was saying, it wasn't against, you know. Uh, it wasn't a stance about drinking and driving or anything like that. I mean, there's no excuse for that.
Yep. Yep.
None whatsoever. But if I roll through a stop sign and get pulled over, I automatically have to do a breathalyzer. And
Mm.
I'm thinking, Okay, that to me just something just to me just seems like, that's a law that was put in place by politicians who got it through the Senate that boom, it's basically it's your life now. And I understand how it works. People
Yeah.
shouldn't drink and drive or smoke up and drive. I get that. But is the government smarter than the average citizen when it comes to that? And that's just, I guess, kind of so when you're talking about how people can be so spiteful and vengeful when they see people in positions of influence doing it, why would
Yeah.
they do anything different?
Yeah, and I mean the whole idea is that honesty and integrity piece, right? I mean, you know, we income tax is like that, right? It's based largely on the honor system, right?
Sure.
Any tax system is based on the honor system that you're doing things with integrity and you're not going to rip off the government, that the government's going to get their fair share of what you're earning, because that's how we get social programs. That's how we get all the other things that we want as a society. So it makes sense that the tax man gets paid, right? And for the most part, people are pretty honest about that stuff, sometimes to a fault,
They
right?
try to be, absolutely.
But here's the thing is that they don't expect people to be somewhat honest about this. Like, what happened to you know, have you had anything to drink today? Sticking my head in the car, seeing if I can smell alcohol in someone's breath.
Well, have you ever seen that show
Right?
Border Security?
No.
So it's on the Life Network or something. So basically, it's about people that are coming in and out of Canada, the United States. So the theme song is "Would I Lie to You" by the Rhythmic. So
Right.
way to set it. And the whole show is basically, it doesn't paint those folks that work very hard in a good light because and I get there's the whole salaciousness about, you want a reaction for reality TV and blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. But
Yeah.
it just looks like, you're going to go up against, somebody that's just going to be totally difficult to deal with. And they're not like that because I've done that 1,000 times and, um, that's kind of, the point. It's just, you want people to comply and whatever, just approach them nicer.
Yeah,
Right.
and there's things that happen in society too that feed into this whole idea of integrity, and I think it spills over into the music business itself, right? I mean, you know, not everything that we see done, even by public officials, is done with the utmost integrity,
Yeah.
right? And so sometimes decisions are made without appropriate input and all those other things that would occur. And for us, how can you be loyal when people aren't being loyal to you, right?
Yeah.
That loyalty is a two-way street thing, and I think we all have to be able to move beyond whatever it is that hinders us and look at what we have in common. What do we want to accomplish together that we could not accomplish apart?
Yeah.
Right? And you look at it's kind of almost like a marriage contract when you think about it, because you're committing something to that other person, right? When you want to work with integrity, you're actually wanting to build a relationship with that other individual,
Yeah.
right? And by building that relationship, you really, really want to get their loyalty, right? And the best way to get loyalty is just show it,
No, I agree. I totally agree.
right? I
Uh,
mean, because you got to demonstrate what you want people to give you back. If you're looking for integrity, if you're looking for a good relationship with someone else, you have to be willing to put it out there and say, you know, this is what integrity looks like. This is what loyalty looks like, and I'll be loyal to you until I can make you loyal to me. In the sense that I want you to pay attention to what I'm doing here, how I'm extending myself to you, how I've got my hand out there, but you're shaking my hand, but you're really not committing to anything here.
yep.
I
Yep.
want a little bit more from you in terms of, loyalty. And loyalty for me, you and I've talked about loyalty when as it relates to the record label itself, right? People reposting my posts, people boosting my posts on the record label that are members of the record label, right?
Yep.
And those same artists maybe watching the show once in a while and sharing the show with other people.
Yep.
Right. I very seldom get shares of our weekly live podcast here across social media. Unless I share it to several places, it doesn't typically get picked up by people, which is a bit disappointing.
Maybe a bit disappointing, but probably what's the word I'm looking for? It's probably not surprising. It isn't surprising, just because I would look at it this way: if somebody's in a group picture, who are they looking for first? Themselves, right?
Yep.
So if that's nothing to do with them, or there's no gain to them, very few
No.
people will do it. So it's not surprising. That's just human nature, I guess.
Yeah, it is a human nature thing. Well, we're not gonna solve the human condition tonight. We're
Nope.
15 minutes. We're actually 3 periods of overtime, I think, right? 5 minutes each.
Yeah.
And now we're heading towards the shootout because after 3 periods, nobody's any further ahead.
No.
Sean, thanks for joining me from the darkness tonight. All we see now is the reflection on your glasses because you've almost completely disappeared off camera. Oh, there you are, just a little bit there. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Next week's guest is
my buddy, Mr. Mark Horton.
Right, and Mark has managed a whole bunch of bands, done road management work on the big leagues.
Yeah, he's a heavy hitter. He is a local promoter now here in town, and he is the writing partner of Miss Michelle Ryder, writing some great tunes. And
he plays guitar in your project too, right?
He's been my bandmate now. Well, I played in another band with Mark a few years ago, but Mark's been with us now for almost 3 years.
Mark is an up-and-coming producer. I mean, he is doing a tremendous job on Michelle Ryder's music, and we're really, really proud that he's kind of a part of the Indie Tunes Records family. I'd like him to be even more a part of what we do here because, who knows, maybe down the road we may have mastering projects for him.
There you go.
So we'll maybe talk. We won't talk about that on the show, but I'm sure that conversation may come up in the green room next week. So next week on the show, we've got again Mark Horton on the show with us next week. On the 22nd, the Queen of Scream, none other than Darby Mills, former front woman for
the Headpins.
The Headpins, that's right. And the Darby Mills Project. She's doing a bunch of other stuff right now. We're going to be talking about that stuff with her, where she's at in her career on the 22nd. On the 29th, Jason Dozer, the mic stand guy, is on with us. And he just built 2 microphone stands for
Ann Wilson.
Ann Wilson and Justin Timberlake.
Yeah.
I mean, he's making mic stands for heavy hitters. I don't know that we're going to get a mic stand for free out of him.
After the last hour and a bit of what we just talked about, you're going to ask him for free stuff. Unbelievable.
Always be closing. Always be closing.
Not closing. Always be scamming. That's a different topic.
That's ABC. Anyways, I'm always looking for something mutual that would have his logo as well as our logo on it, and it would sit right here every time we do the podcast every week. So
there you go.
It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's maybe a green room conversation to be had. Yeah. This has been the Indie Show. I'm Kenny. That guy, Sean, he's not. And this is the Indie Show. Join us every Wednesday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I am Kenny, and you